All right, welcome back everybody we've decided to actually split this conversation into two conversations. So this is part one of two, where we'll be talking to the team at Vista about building a culture of experimentation. And today we have Flavio, Michelle, and Lukas. Lukas is a repeat offender or guest on the TLC. So welcome back. I think you're wearing the same shirt
Yes, not the
now
same
as in the
snake, but I
picture.
am wearing the same shirt. Yes.
Foxy. I love it. I love it. So most of you know Lukas from his time in the
I'm
industry and at Booking,
not
and
sure
now
where the
he
snake is. Wait.
I go get the snake. Now he's director of experimentation at Vista and is helping to build a culture of experimentation there, which is really interesting because they already had experimentation, and the component that he has done is really interesting and part of what we're going to talk about today with an ambassadors program and others. Um, Next up is Michelle, who is actually one of those ambassadors at Vista. She's also the principal designer and combines design, product, and ops responsibilities of her own, and then she coordinates with the design developers, data analysts, and product managers to make changes and recommendations for changes at Vista. And then we have, last but not least, Flavio, who is the senior manager of experimentation, and he is really focused on scaling experimentation with embedded experimentation, so like decentralized hub spoke type situations, and then really empowering those teams to operate autonomously. And for those of you who have done that, you know that that allows, if we will, that flywheel to spin a little bit faster, have more people doing experimentation. So really excited to have all three of you. And let me kick off your presentation and let's take it off. Anything else we want to say before we get started, Lukas?
Well, thanks for having me again. It's always a good sign if you speak somewhere and then they ask you back. I guess that's a good feedback. Yeah, I'm super happy to be here because in between the last time I spoke here and now, I think my role changed from working at Booking.com, working at Vista. And for me, that was a very deliberate move. Like I was part of a company where experimentation is the norm and it's really entrenched, and I sort of wanted to figure out what is it like to be in a company where that's not the case. And one of the reasons was actually the TLC community, because I kept sort of seeing questions and seeing answers and just not quite grokking the context, right? And I see these questions being asked, and it's like, why is that a question? Like, what's wrong with this company? And so for me, it was really like sort of eye-opening to sort of step outside of Booking and go to Vista. Then the funny thing that happened is that I thought I was going to a company that had no experimentation whatsoever. That was the goal. And then first week I run into Flavio and I ask him like how are things going, and Flavio's been with the company for 12 years, I believe, and he's been pretty much running experiments since day one, and so Vista has a long history of experimentation. I think experimentation has been part of the lifeblood. What they haven't had was centralization. So they have very disparate groups of people running experiments. And one of the things that we want to talk about here today is sort of how we're trying to create a shared culture of experimentation. So not necessarily sort of start experimenting, but how you create a shared norms and shared environment and shared standards that help people run experiments better. So that's what we're here to talk about today. We initially had two topics to talk about. Josh was also going to speak about time split testing, but Josh is in a plane. And so we are fully remote, so everyone's all over the place, but he wasn't too happy to do the talk from a plane. And so we decided to postpone that topic. And we also have another paper out just now that about sample ratio mismatch checks that actually might be a good fit for that content as well. So we'll do a follow-up where we do that content.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just a quick pitch, because I put my notes over here, part two, where we talk about that split testing for pricing optimization and what Lukas just mentioned with the SRM, automated SRM detection and analysis. I've had several conversations with some of you about like what type of analysis do you do. This is a pretty big deal, but they're going to share part two of that October 7th. So put it on your calendars. That the invite isn't out yet, but it will be. I think we decided 10 to 11 Central Time. So if you want to put a placeholder, the invite's coming soon. All right. Shall we kick it off?
Please. So today we have a presentation in 3 parts. It's me first. I'll talk about the high-level org structure, or sort of the high-level goals that we have for this program. Why do we exist? Why are we talking about this? Then Flavio will talk a little bit about the organization around decentralization, like Kelly said. And then lastly, we thought it would be cool to have an actual ambassador, like someone who's really on the ground doing the hard work, to speak as well. So we're super happy to have Michelle here as well. So I'll try to keep it short so there's more time for Flavio and Michelle to speak. Me first. Go. So if you had I think the book is called Good to Great, and I don't remember the author, but he talks about this idea of having a big, hairy, audacious goal, a BHAG. And Vista has one, and our big, hairy, audacious goal is to test every change, like literally everyone. And there's a lot, it's a big company, so there's a lot of changes being made. And so this is not necessarily feasible, right? We're not saying that this is something that we're going to achieve in the next 5 years, but it is sort of the dot on the horizon, the thing that we're striving towards. And the reason for that is that we want to, what we call a jaw-dropping customer value. We want to give something to our customers that they really appreciate. We want to be their marketing partner for these small businesses. But we also want to confirm that when we build stuff and we do things, that they actually does cause jaws to be dropped, right? There's a causal thing. And so to make sure that that's the case, we have the desire at least to test all of these things. And again, that's not necessarily feasible, but it is the goal that we're working against. And so we have this as a sort of what we call a North Star. And as part of that North Star, we sort of break it down to 5 different aspects. The first one is that we believe that this is one way in which we can be truly customer obsessed, right? It's not sufficient to think about customers while you are designing the product, although that's also very important, right? You have to have a good idea of why this would make customers' lives better. But then to truly be customer obsessed, you also have to make sure that when you roll it out, it actually does what you thought it was going to do, right? And so we believe that this is part of our customer obsession. And second is that we actually want autonomy within our teams. So we want different country teams or product teams to be able to execute quite independently. And we believe that experimentation is one way of empowering autonomy, because it gives teams much more room to sort of identify when they fail and to revert when they fail, right? If you don't have these safeguards in place, then often people tend to sort of close down and restrict autonomy because they want to safeguard the business. And we actually think that experimentation is a way of empowering autonomy for these teams. And then thirdly, we want to be ubiquitous. Like I said, we don't just want to run button color tests on the homepage, although Michelle, being interested in UX, probably does want to change button colors for very good reasons that are related to customer needs. That is not the only thing that we want. Sorry, Michelle. That's not the only thing we want to do, right? We at Vista has a large production facility in Waltham and in Venlo here in the Netherlands. I'm not in the Netherlands anymore. So not here in the Netherlands, there in the Netherlands. So we have large factories that produce the goods that we ship to customers. We want to make sure that when we make changes to that production process, we also experiment with how those changes are made, right? And you can think of things like customer service, phone systems that we also want to experiment with. So this is not just about the website, and it's not just about marketing. The fourth, we want to be trustworthy. Like if you're going to scale this and you're going to do lots of experiments, you want to make sure that those experiments are correct. And so trustworthiness and reliability of the data is a huge component of this journey. And lastly, we want to be transparent. We believe that without full transparency, where people can see what other people are doing, where they can give feedback, where they can learn from what other people are doing, you're not getting the full benefit of experimentation, right? If a team is able to independently execute experiments in isolation, but then there's no way of sharing, or no easy way of sharing that with other teams, then you're sort of limiting the scope and impact of experimentation. And also, I think it's related to the trustworthiness point. I think you need some amount of transparency for trustworthiness to be in place. And so this is the sort of the North Star that we're aiming for. If you see the graph on the right, I don't know if anyone recognizes the graph. It's from a famous blog post, HBR blog post. Anyone recognize it? Kelly, do you recognize
Building
it?
the culture of experimentation one?
Very good, very good. Stefan Tomke, HBR. Yeah, so this is the graph of experimentation at Bing. So the number of experiments that Bing ran, this is the non-annotated version of it. There's an annotated version of it that shows like what are the inflection points and when did they really unlock more experimentation potential. And I added this because if you go to the next slide, Kelly, you can see that Vista is very much at the beginning of this journey, right? Vista is pretty much, I might even be slightly optimistic there. I think we're more like at the beginning of 2009 rather than at the end of 2009. And so in terms of volume, Vista isn't near the end of this, but that is what we're aiming for, right? And we want to see this hockey stick. And so I've often said, like, one way to sort of gauge how quickly we're going is like the number of experiments isn't necessarily the goal, right? We don't think that more is necessarily better, but it is some sort of a yardstick to see how are we progressing against this big, hairy, audacious goal of ours. I'll update you in a few years to see whether we actually progressed. So if you read some of my prior work, then you might have read about the flywheel model that we wrote together with Alexander Fabian. And the idea behind that model is that if you want to scale experimentation, they're basically dealing with a loop where there's different points of friction on the loop. Do people understand that experimentation is important? Do they see the value? Do they invest in infrastructure and these things? And so you want to make that flywheel spin faster. And quickly after I joined Vista, I realized that if it's a wheel, then you need a hub, right? And so very quickly we started building a small team, a cross-functional team that we call Experimentation Hub, who isn't running experiments. Like, their goal isn't to run individual experiments. Their goal is to unlock potential for other teams. And so to reduce friction, to reduce cost, to figure out what is stopping other people from running experiments and then enabling them. And so we are sort of the spill of this thing. We don't run experiments ourselves, but we pay close attention to what people are doing, trying to help them spin. Quickly on the left, you see the current team. We have top left is Kevin Anderson, our PM for the technical team. Top right is Sarah Butov, recently joined, is our experimentation consultant lead. And then on the middle row, and then Edin, another developer on the team. And at the bottom, we have Adriana, one more developer, and Flavio, our lead experimentation. And so you see we have quite a mix of different skill sets. That's very deliberate, right? This is not an analytics team. We don't view experimentation or unlocking these capabilities as something that is purely analytical. In fact, we're a little bit slanted towards the development team, right? We've got 3 developers and 1 PM, and then we've got 2 analysts. And that's very deliberate because there's a lot of foundational technology that needs to be built. And there's a lot of glue that needs to be built, gluing different systems together. There's a lot of infrastructure or integration that needs to happen. And all of these are not analytical tasks, they're technical development tasks. So this is where I have huge imposter syndrome. We won the Experimentation Culture Awards a few weeks ago. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, jury. And obviously, I'm flattered, and I'm super happy and excited about that. And I think one of the reasons we won is that we're sharing so much about what we're doing, not necessarily where we're at. So I think we have to acknowledge that Vista is all the way at the beginning of this journey. They are not a very advanced experimentation culture, but we're doing this in public as much as possible because we want to share with the world so other people can use it, but also so we can get feedback and we can learn from them. But I get a little bit of imposter syndrome because I'm not sure like we deserve to be called an award-winning experimentation culture, right? That feels a little bit like over the top for a company that is barely scratching the surface of what's possible with experimentation. And the other thing that is, I haven't ever shared this publicly, but one of the reasons that I left Booking was that when Booking won Booking.com won the Experimentation Culture Awards for organizational experimentation culture, I immediately asked myself, did I have anything to do with this? Like, did I just get lucky and get dropped in this organization that has a super strong culture of experimentation, and I'm accepting this award on behalf of an organization, but I had nothing to do with it? or is it like, did I have some influence, however small, on this? And so one of the reasons I left is I actually decided I was going to go somewhere else and win it again. That was the secret goal. Obviously I should have pre-registered that, but I was afraid. Let me put it that, right? I was afraid of failing publicly, so I didn't tell anyone. Stupid in hindsight. I was expecting it to take at least 3 to 5 years. And then like 1 year in, we won the award. And the next day I had a huge black hole. I'm like, what the fuck am I gonna do now? So that's cool, because we have so much more to do, right? We're only just getting started, but this is no longer a goal. This one's in the bag. We've got this one now. We will continue to share though. Like I love this idea of starting from smaller, not nothing, but starting from smaller, building it out and just sharing it and telling other people what we're doing and hoping that other people learn, and seeing where we end up. So stay tuned.
Looking forward to it. The community appreciates it tremendously.
Good.
All right. Flavio, you're up.
Okay, so then thanks, Lucas. Lucas did like a great presentation and talking about the teams, how we organize it. So then talking about like organized to scale experimentations. So I just bring here how is like an org chart, so you guys to have an understanding. I will not go into detail like all of this because this could be another session, and also Lucas would love to do another session just to explain all these that we put it together. So as Lucas was saying when he's joined, we had already this idea about the Experimentation Hub before. I also was like a leading web analytics and Experimentation Hub at the same time. And then a few months before was just focusing experimentations. And we had that's like a great support from the business to bring someone really bold to work with us. And then Lucas joined us and things just started to transform, and it was nice. And the shape that we're going, the journey that we are doing together is super, super nice. And one of the things that we discussed, and it was very similar to Lucas as well, when we have like a great conversations, was about the ambassadors, right? So then Bookings had something similar. I had read so many, and it was based on my experience with Vista and how Vista was organized themselves as well. It was clear for me that's supposed to be to work with ambassadors as well. So then that was a good thing because Lucas and I, in that moment, like we said, yep, we align. Let's do this. Let's make this happening. So then we start our journey about like now let's convince the business, and then Lucas has an important role on that one and I have an important role to create the program, let's say that. So then as you can see, like we have these what Lucas mentioned before, these what you call like the 3 types of experimentation related skill sets that you can see like that big blue one there in the right, that would be the Experimentation Hub. So that we would have like a 2 skill sets there. That's one would be more talking about the experimentation process, the analysis framework, and define like we work in Vista with like the freedom within a framework. So then the idea that we decide, we just suggest what would be the best framework based on our experience, but we also test with the domains because each domain is a different organization, a different small company or a small business for us, and then we can just like learn with them and adapt ourselves as well and reiterate on that as we go. And the other part we have that's our also in this part we could say that's like you have these 2 groups inside this the circle. That would be like you can see the Experimentation Center of Excellence. That would be where I would be with Marianne and Sarah, and you would have like the product team. So the like product development, that would be the developers that we had. However, we have this distinguished, but we work like as just one, and we are always working together, collaborate with each other in different projects. So then this is good for us because we improve ourselves, our skill sets as well, and we learn other stuff as well between us. And also it's a really good support to the entire business because in the end, as you can see, we are the one that's talking directly with the ambassadors and the rest of the community. So then when someone comes to us in our help experimentation channel, anyone is almost like ready to answer any kind of questions, from technical to more analytical part. So then we are learning continuously, and little by little, everyone try to give that answers for our clients as well. But then came what's the most important one. That's like the domain being experiment, like the domain do experimentations, and then it would enter the ambassador. And why the ambassador is bigger here in this center? It's just because he's the core of to allow scale experimentation in the company, because otherwise we are a small team. How can you try to help 3,000 people? So, and the amount of teams that we have in domains and sub-domains that exist inside the domains, creating different experiential teams would be really difficult. So then we understood as a hub, the ambassadors understood they spoke, but then the ambassadors becomes a hub inside the domains as well, because all the different teams start to be their spokes. So then that is the idea that we try to do, centralize it. What is the part that's important to create and create the framework to allow to scale. And then we have the other part that would be with the ambassadors, allow and execute and make it happen. So then in the end, their success is our success altogether. So then our success metric in the end up being their success metrics as well for this process. Lukas, you'd like to add something? No? Okay. So one thing that I would like to put it here and put it clear, it's about the Experimentation ambassadors profile. So as you can see on the left, we have one screenshot for one of our ambassador sessions. We have 2 sessions, unfortunately, and that's because the different time zones that we have. So then we cover the same topics, but we have these 2 different ones. So this is one that we are trying to cover India and Australia mainly. But below, I'm highlighting the different roles or skill sets that exist for the ambassadors. So then this means that's all these kind of skill sets and these differences that exist makes us think a lot, how you make this happen to this program. So then it was important to us to develop a program that we will try to put everyone at the same level as much as possible, right? So then someone would be much more analytical, someone else would be much more like a UX UI, but we want to bring everyone to the same level in the point that they feel comfortable enough to multiply this knowledge to their domains. So one thing that we always try to do also, you see in the border, that's the supporting analyst. What you are trying to always do is have for those ones that doesn't have analytical skill set yet, we would like to try to always embed it then with some supporting analysts from the DNA, because this makes the makes the go faster to the learning, right? So they have someone that always supporting him, but they always have us as well to help in on this. So then this is just because of I would like to highlight this because of this determining how we move forward with our program. Next slide, please. So as you can see, I would like to put it clear to everyone. So when people read the paper, sometimes they would be expect that's wow, they have the solution. They know how to do that. No, we are experimenting as well. So then your experimentation team and you experiment with this as well. And we are learning and you will be iterating more. And now with Sarah, that's joining us. So then you will be iterating and going to our next level and trying to spin this even faster, because right now our next focus is not just the ambassadors, but it's the ambassadors and help the ambassadors multiply this faster with their domains as well. So then in the initial plans, what we had was exactly
programs that we call the onboarding, the ongoing, and the ceremonies. So then the onboarding is try to bring everyone to the same level and make sure that they have the knowledge enough to run experiments and autonomously. That is the main one. But at the same time that we were doing this, we were trying to build the community, created the culture of experimentation. So then this also determined
timeline about how this works. If you see, we didn't start the ongoing, so then we're still in gray because of that. And the idea of the ongoing is that we will take some of the subjects that we identify in the onboarding that will require some more deep knowledge and make it then more expert on that one. So then we are constantly collecting these feedbacks, and that's what you'll be starting to do for the next our next fiscal year as well. And the ceremonies, we have listed a bunch of ceremonies that could be happening with us, with the domain, and cross domains as well. Some of them is already in progress. Some of them is not yet in progress because we are not in that maturity yet. But we already created that and put it there to start the conversations. And you see which one would fit, which one is not fit. So this is about the programs. Below, you can see our curriculum for the onboarding program. This is composed by 7 modules. And if you can see, I believe that you cannot read it here now, but you can read later. With the most technical ones comes to the last. That the ones that's about the statistics, that's the module 6. And the module 7 would be the one that's about the steps to execute an experiment. All the previous one was super important to us to build this culture of experimentations with the ambassadors and make it then really understand what you are trying to achieve here. And the other ones that's really important one is the participation, right? So then we have a Confluence page for every single module. We are interactive, then they put in their questions, we are replying. We have a Slack just for the ambassadors, but also for the health experimentations. We have these fortnightly meetings with them to discuss. And also we have one-on-ones. Lukas has one-on-ones with the ambassadors as well. I may have one-on-ones with the ambassador in order to work with them by hand when they have more challenges in their projects. These would be a kind of summary. Later for the Q&A, I'm open to answer any questions that you guys might have. So then, what comes difficult, right? Every single time that you're talking about create a program, like a study program, is always difficult to measure it. What is the right metric? What is the right metric to define? And even more when you are piloting this. So then we are there, we are trying, we are getting some metrics that we are using, and you have that understanding about how useful is this being to the ambassadors and to the business as well. And some of these metrics we observe as a positive. So then we started in Feb with 8 ambassadors. Now we are 15. So then this tells us that the company starts to understand the culture of experimentations. More domains is becoming more aware about that and is contacting Lukas or contacting directly us and say, hey, can you tell me more about this ambassador program? What do you need to have? How will I sponsor an ambassador in my domain? And this is a good one. The other one is like in the course itself, we have some ways to check this. So then we check the attendance. So we made it that's like they need to attend, right? So then the sponsors guarantee that they would have X time to spend with us. That would be like a 1 day a week to go through our documentations, to attend the sessions, and to do their work as ambassadors. And also we will do some skill assessment. That was like more than 8% of them has passed, our first one. And one thing that's from the 15 already, we had the 10 ambassadors that they are completely autonomous, already running experiments. They run one, but they run multiples already. And one thing that was really good in the last quarter, that I started to work close for one of the ambassadors, we started to multiply. So then we make experimentation things inside the domains to start execute experiments by themselves. So then their experiment owners, it starts to feel enabled to run experiments autonomously.
Awesome. Thank you. Michelle.
Yeah, awesome. Hi, guys. Thank you so much for having me again, Kelly. I'm really excited to meet you guys and chat with you guys today. So I'm going to start just by talking a little bit about a design system. For those of you who are not that familiar with what it is, a design system is a set of guidelines and principles that indicate how any company website should look and feel. So for example, think of your favorite website and notice how when you navigate from page to page, all of the typography, colors, buttons, input form fields, hero banners, etc. Notice how all those visual components look throughout the entire site. When you recall, are they consistent? Do they feel on brand throughout the site? Or do they feel disjointed, unintuitive, and maybe a bit brand generic? A successful design system will essentially look to make the former possible by including user-friendly components and patterns, also known as the visual building blocks of the site, for both designers and developers to reuse in the experiences they built, as well as providing documented guidance on how to use those components and patterns to create an intuitive, consistent, branded experience for our customers. So if you can go to the next slide, why do I mention all of that when we're talking about experimentation? Essentially, since any design change we make on the design system impacts the entire site globally, a large part of my role is actually testing to make sure that our designs have both a positive impact and no significantly negative impact on our users and business metrics. And so that's where my role in the ambassador program comes in. As a designer, I'm fairly well versed in conducting qualitative user experiments like surveys, moderated and unmoderated prototype testing, perception testing, things like that, but it was never really classically taught how to conduct quantitative experiments or how to look at, let's say, financial data with a detailed eye to gauge the impact that our designs have on business metrics. So since qualitative and quantitative data complement one another so nicely because they essentially tell us both the what and the why behind performance and behind user behavior. Being a part of the program has really helped me to become, I would say, much more of a well-rounded designer. And so if you go to the next slide, it's namely taught me a couple of things. So first, how to write data-driven and measurable hypotheses to base our designs off of. This has really helped us as a team to be more intentional with what designs we spend our time exploring. And it's also been really instrumental in helping me and my team put together a plan to test our assumptions and to make sure that we go into each test knowing exactly what we want to learn or get out of those designs. And so the Ambassador program has really amazing documentation. Huge props to Lukas and Flavio for putting that together. This documentation it kind of covers everything. And so for the hypothesis part, they do have great documentation on what makes a good hypothesis. And so we actually use that to create a hypothesis-driven process that works for us. Second, if you can, thank you. Second, to understand statistics 101 and ensure that my experiments have enough power to reach statistical significance. So we're not basing site-wide sweeping design changes on results from too small of a sample size. The ambassadors meet every other week in an hour-long session to discuss topics like this in great detail, which I always enjoy. I love our conversations, especially, and Flavio kind of hinted at this, how we kind of make sure that everyone understands the material before moving on to the next topic. I think that what that has done is sort of even the playing field for people like me who are a bit newer to the material, don't come from a classic, data background. So we can kind of, come in and get up to speed fairly quickly. And third, probably one of my favorites, it's helped me to create a network of other data-driven ambassadors and analysts who have a lot of amazing skills, amazing perspectives to bring to the table. And as a result, I've been also able to learn from them. So not only just from the homework and the documentation, but learn from other folks and their previous experiments that they've run to help me form my own hypotheses and process for the systems team. Again, I think this is one of my favorite parts of the ambassador program, because as someone who is not classically trained in data, I naturally have a lot of questions, and sometimes I don't necessarily want to wait another 2 weeks, let's say, to ask my questions. So thankfully, all the other ambassadors so far have been really friendly and also just as hungry for knowledge. So it makes it just easy to message them and ask for help. And I think that we've built up this kind of camaraderie during the biweekly sessions to the point where we'll be on a call, I'll mention something that I'm confused about, and then 5 minutes later, I have several ambassadors messaging me separately, offering to demo things like Quantimetric or Looker. One time, I had a bunch of people give me advice on how to conduct an AA test because I was looking for baseline metrics for this test that my team was looking to run. So it's just been a really great connection, I think, just byproduct of the program. And then lastly, as you can see here on the screen, this program has, I think, really done a good job of breaking down the lessons in a very easily digestible way. That's helped me bring what I've learned back to my team. My team is a lot of really talented designers and engineers, but they're not necessarily that familiar with quantitative experimentation, just like I wasn't. And so I've been able to kind of bring this knowledge back to them so they can start to think about how they might want to experiment on their own too. We've since started a monthly team data workshop on our own, where we kind of come to the session with questions and look through engagement tools like Google Analytics, Quantimetric, to see if we can find any trends that will inform our design explorations. So even though I'm technically the ambassador attending the learning sessions, it's started to cascade down to the non-ambassadors to spread that test and learn culture as well. So that's been really exciting.
Beautiful. That's exactly what we're supposed to do, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then if you go to the next slide, I'm just going to kind of quickly wrap things up. So overall, my experience with the ambassador program has been really positive so far. At first, it was a bit hard to learn a new skill. I mean, the extent of my knowledge on the subject was like the one statistics class I took in high school. So, so that was basically it. But the detailed and extensive documentation and the forums to kind of incrementally review those lessons on a regular cadence really helped me personally to understand more about quantitative experimentation to, again, complement the qualitative side. of my experience. It sort of opened my eyes to knowing that I don't really know anything, but kind of in a good way, since that's what we do testing for. There is a bit of homework involved prior to each session, but it's pretty succinct and to the point. The beginning sessions were a bit more theoretical, but I have to say I'm personally really looking forward to the next couple sessions where the preparation and the homework are much more like hands-on and tactical. I personally learn by doing, so I'm excited to apply what I've learned so far in that kind of theoretical world to a real test use case, and just again bring that back to the team to extend that test and learn culture beyond just the ambassadors. So that's a little bit of a look into the life of an ambassador. I guess with that, I'll hand it back to Lukas to close.
Thank you, Michelle. That was awesome. I'm grinning all the way through because you're painting it as you are learning, right? But I've also seen you bring things to the ambassadors and the ambassadors learning from you because, like Flavio said, like it is a diverse group of ambassadors. It's not just analysts, and that is very much deliberately and by design. Like we very consciously said we want to have different sets of skills in this group because they have to learn from each other, because that's how we get the learning feedback going. And so I'm super happy. That's why I'm grinning ear to ear, because I'm super happy with all the stuff that you're bringing to the table and things that people are learning from you, because I think that really shows that that this is working, in the sense that we've created a group of people now who are teaching each other skills, who are willing to jump in and help, and that are across the entire organization sharing these learnings. And I think that is the power of this program. I'm super proud of that one that Flavio showed, like in the metrics of like how we measure program success. That one is the kicker, right? The fact that we have one ambassador who successfully helped another team run an experiment. That is awesome. Like that shows that we could sort of expand this tree out and sort of build it out, and that's really cool to see. So thank you both for presenting.
We have a couple of questions.
We'll take questions, I guess, right?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, are there questions?
Yep. Anthony asked, how large are the dev PM analyst teams at Vista? And is there a target for the number of ambassadors to support experimentation for that size of an org?
Ooh, so it's a great question, because Flavio and I talked a lot about this. So to answer the first question, it depends. There's groups where there's 10 devs to 1 PM, and there's groups where there's like almost 1 to 2. And so it's very different for different product groups. We are also supporting content squads who have no developers, right? That are using content management systems to make changes and run experiments. And so there's no like single ratio that we're applying across the entire organization. But I think the second question is the more important one, is like, do we have an idea of how many ambassadors we need per product team? And the answer is no. And that is also deliberate and by design, because like Flavio said, the buy-in or the support for this program is also decentralized, and that is also by design. And so these people do not report to me. They do not report into our organization. They are reporting to like everywhere else. Michelle is part of the design. I think you report up into marketing at some point. What we wanted was for these parts of the organization to explicitly buy in to being part of the program. And so we said, if you want to be an ambassador, you need to be able to dedicate 1 day a week to the program. That's a bare minimum, right? You probably need more time to do the job well, but to at least attend the ceremonies and to get through the material, you need 1 day a week. And we can't give you that time, right? That you don't, it's not part of my org, so I can't tell you that you have this time available. And so your manager has to do that. And so those are the sponsors that Flavio was talking about. They are either Michelle's manager or her manager's manager has said, yes, it's okay for Michelle to spend 1 day a week on this program. So they are the person who decide how many ambassadors there are, because they are the ones who are paying for the time. And so we've said, if you believe that you do not have enough support, hire more ambassadors, right? We don't dictate how many you need. When you have as many as you're willing to pay for. And so this does two interesting things. I think on the one hand, the ambassadors feel more supported, I hope. Maybe Michelle can speak to that. But because they are explicitly being told that they have time available. right? This is not a side project. This is an actual job that you get paid for. Right? But the other thing it does for us from a central perspective is we know who is bought in, right? We know who is leaning in, because there are parts of the organization who have no ambassador, and they come to me and say, can you support us with an experiment? And I say, no, I have an agreement with the CEO. This is the model we use. The model we use is that you dedicate 0.2 FTE to the program, and then we will help you. And if you cannot dedicate 0.2 FTE, then you don't really care. And then in that case, I don't care either. And so we're being very strict about this, right? So there's part of the organization who are not getting support. And you could say, well, that is limiting sort of the speed at which we scale out, right? We should be evangelizing more and helping them. But I feel like this is a little bit like, if you really want people to buy into something and really do something and really understand something, they have to want it from themselves. They have to lean in. So I have no time for trying to teach people some skill that they don't want. So I hope that answers your question. So there's no ratio that we're looking for.
And just added one thing, that's what Lukas was saying now, that's like if potentially you're making these, we are scaling not in the optimal speed, but there is one thing that we need to see, that we put it at like a one team that was enabled by one of the ambassadors. But we already see like some effects of the multiplication with the ambassadors, because recently we had some new ambassadors join, and 2 of these new ambassadors is being supported by other ambassadors already. So then these ambassadors, what you are trying to then, because sometimes you don't have an experiment to start right now to practice, they already talk with the other ambassadors and say, hey, can I shadow you when you're the next experiment? So then we had like a Brooke, she's not here, but we also have Sabrina, that's for one of our country domains, and she's already in pairing to Sophia and Christina, and looking for that to do that. So then you can see some effects already that is happening inside this group. So then we expect that over time, even if now we put these rules and could be a little bit restricted later, this will come somehow.
I remember one discussion we had, Flavio, at some point about like, what is the future of the ambassador program? Like where are we, what is the end state that we're looking for? And I think we came to the conclusion that the end state for the ambassador program is that we would be super happy if we can disband it, right? If there's a point in time where we're like, actually,
because everybody becomes ambassadors.
People are like, everyone is teaching everyone. We have a thriving community of people who know, right? And also sad, because I kind of like this program. I like working with these people. It's like Michelle said, it's a very, very positive community. But really, ideally, we get to a state where we don't need it anymore.
When you told that in the session to the ambassadors, they were scary. But then we explained why. So then they understood. They said, yes, makes sense.
Yeah, that was kind of awkward. Yeah.
Well, the community doesn't go away. The collaboration doesn't go away. The learning and the sharing doesn't go away. Just the need for the training and structure goes away because everybody's
the need for centralized support. Yeah, and I think one of the great things that Flavio is doing here, and the contributions that Michelle has made, for example, is that we're doing all of these in Confluence, not because we like writing stuff down, but like ideally, the next phase that we're thinking about is how do we onboard an ambassador with no face-to-face? Like how do we do this like in a self-service manner? Like which parts of this can we take out? Now, part of me doesn't want to do it without face-to-face because it's so difficult to build community spirit if you have no face-to-face meetings, right? Yeah. Initially, we had deliberately more face-to-face, but we have to think about, like, if we want to scale this out and someone wants to learn the content but not join the program, like how can they read the same material or do the exercises or like follow some self-paced training? So ideally, it's not necessarily that the program doesn't, maybe that's not the right word, right? Maybe the program does still exist, but it isn't such a deliberate effort by Flavio and by me where we have to spend time on this deliberately. It becomes more organic. And
or maybe your ambassadors become the teachers.
Oh, that's already.
They're teaching each other, right? But like, what about a scenario where Lukas and Flavio are replaced by people
by ambassadors?
The ambassadors, yeah.
And somehow this we are seeing some signals of this one. So then recently, because of the one-on-ones that we have with the ambassadors, Lukas and I, and you will see like because they have different backgrounds, and you can see like, wow, what this ambassador is doing here is really great in this piece of experimentation. What is this other ambassador is doing here is really great what they're doing. And then now we invited them to, we have a learning circle session, and also in our session of the ambassadors say, hey, can you share what you just showed to me? Because this is awesome. I believe that you need to share that for the ambassador. So then the last learning circle, we had Michelle and Sandra, that's another ambassador, sharing how they are doing like the design stage of the experimentation. And that's awesome. And people will see like a different backgrounds, like what Michelle was saying, like, okay, I'm not super strong in data, and she's trying to get stronger in data, but she has super strong like in the other background, so that she can share it with everyone. And then they started to observe that and see how they can exchange all those knowledge, and that's like a beautiful to see as well.
You know, one thing I noticed, all three of you at different times actually used the word yet when describing something. So it seems like at least the three of you, if not the entire org or the culture, the hub that you're a part of, or the ambassador program, has a very strong growth mindset. This understanding, and that, my favorite was you, Flavio, when you said, you know, some of them aren't analysts, and then you paused and you said yet. And so we provide that, so that idea that someone like you, Michelle, who, you know, comes from a very solid qualitative research and design background, could learn those statistical underpinnings of the quantitative side so that you can help make better decisions and understand the impact of those decisions. That's pretty powerful stuff. And I'm just curious, do you all think it's something that you have innately as people, or is it something that is a part of Vista's culture, or is it something that's part of this hub?
Michelle?
Yeah, I will say for me, I think it's a little bit of both. I just personally love data. I don't know where that came from, like, because I'm not trained in data, but I think as a designer, like, you know, when you're sort of trained as a designer, you're trained to be a problem solver visually. And so like a lot of what you have to kind of figure out and do when you're solving these problems is like point to any sort of research, any sort of data that you can kind of hold on to. Like I remember in school, if we didn't have a whole like, you know, thick booklet of like process research, our teachers would like go back and do it again, right? So I think just inherently as a designer, I'm very interested in data and how that, you know, kind of lends itself to just like learning about users, because if you want to make a user experience better, you kind of need to have that based off of something. But I will say, I think it also involves the company, because the last company that I was at, they were not data centric at all. And so even though I was very much like, let's get as much user data as we can, the company didn't necessarily want to invest in the tools or the process to kind of like make that happen. So for our end, we're like, all right, what can we kind of scrap together to, you know, to get that data? And coming here and seeing the difference of like, okay, now I can sort of have a place to go for like the passion that I have around data, and it's really celebrated and wanted in the company. I think that those two things kind of come together. So I would say it's a combination for me.
Awesome.
I think for me it's the same. So it's a combination of my background, the previous company being very much a growth company as well. So for me that's just the norm that I took. And then Vista, so clearly a growth company. Like the fact alone that a few years ago they said, right, this remote first thing, we're going all in. Like we don't know how it's going to work, but we'll figure it out. And so the amount of time and resource and energy that's being put into figuring out how to do this, and sort of the very explicit acknowledgement of we are experimenting with this, like we're figuring how to do this. We don't know like whether Confluence is the right solution for this thing. And that's happening at every level, I think. So I think there's very much a growth mindset throughout all of Vista, and definitely the hub. Yeah, and I think Flavio mentioned like this is a pilot. That is also something that we very explicitly said to the ambassadors when we started, right? We said, you are going to be part of a program. You are essentially our guinea pigs, because we also don't know how to do this. But the only way to sort of figure out how to do this is if you work with us and together we figure this out. So I think it was a combination of the people, the org, and the group, for sure. Good question.
And when it was Michelle is saying, explaining this, like it came to my mind that because these, well, we can pass it here, me and Lukas share about like our experience with this program and how we learn a lot of things and how we would just want like to make this work even a little bit more faster now. But one thing that we realized when I started the program, it's like we put all these people in the same room, and they looked like a shy kids. Everyone was like from different areas, and no one was like, who is this other person? Who is this other person? And the most important for us, like, we need to work on this together. Let's make this together. And when people start to realize that we're in the same boat and with a different backgrounds, and we also showing that's like, I don't know most of the things that you know in your domain, and I needed to learn. You need to teach me. But then when everyone realized that we are going together in the same directions, and with our strengths and our weakness, and we are trying to grow together, I believe that was like when things start to go, and everyone now has this mindset. So could be the individual difference, but there is these things about the community. That's now I feel this community, and I see like when Michelle just shared about that welcoming that we put for Bobby, that was the last one. And you can see how they embrace the new colleague that is coming for the ambassador community. And this is nice to see.
That's
I still remember that, like we have one-on-ones with all the ambassadors, right? And Michelle, sorry to call you out, but I still remember we had a one-on-one, and you mentioned that the week prior you had a question and you reached out directly to Sandra to ask a question, and I felt giddy. I'm like, it's working, because the idea that something like because in many organizations you get a sort of, not necessarily silos, but there is hesitation to sort of reach out across boundaries, right? So that is just normal human behavior. So the fact that we have someone from the marketing organization just casually reaching out to someone in a data and analytics organization to ask a question, I'm like, yes.
Beautiful way to break down the silos.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say really quickly, I think it's a really good, like the metaphor I think of when I think of it is like, it's the kind of teach a man to fish kind of thing, where it's like I feel like it's one thing if they're just like, oh, here, I'm going to run this experiment for you and you can kind of watch, but it's a totally different thing. And you're like, I'm going to help you run this experiment, and I'm also going to kind of give you the building blocks so that you don't eventually need me if you don't want. So
I love it. I want to thank you all for sharing part one of the story. We look forward to part two coming soon. And let all TLC members know that we also have another talk. We're going to have Paula Sappington and, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, Jenny Bruckman returning in between, I believe, and they're going to do a talk about moving right to win left. So there are different ways that they've combined qualitative research and quantitative research for decision making with experimentation. It's a pretty powerful talk. I've already seen it. Looking forward to it. And again, the Vista group will be back with some mix up of speakers here and sharing some really cool stuff about sample ratio mismatch and is it time series pricing testing?
Time split testing.
Time split. Dang it. So close. Time split testing for pricing.
Oh man, the debate we had about that name.
Thanks all.
I'll tell you one thing. Thanks for having us. Thanks for having Kelly.
Absolutely. We love having you.
Awesome.
There is one question over in the TLC Slack that we didn't get to. If somebody has time to come over there and continue the conversation in between. And thanks all. Have a great weekend. Enjoy your vacation, Lukas.
Can I say one?
Yeah,
more?
Of course.
Thank you for having us. Thank you for enabling us to share. Obviously, one of the reasons we share is because we want your feedback.
Good point.
Right? Hallmark of good scientific process, peer review. Tell us what we're doing wrong. Like, we are trying to be as public as possible about our process. What's broken? Tell us, please. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks all.
Yeah.
guys.